that misperception of what's going on here extend to the top? You said, you've been at the top levels of British military and intelligence, and do you see the same lack of recognition there, or do they actually get it?
No, I think they get it. And during my time in the Cabinet Office, I worked for Tony Blair and for Gordon Brown. Both of those two certainly got it. And I'm sure that Keir Starmer gets it. I'm sure he understands. I don't have any doubt about that. But their reactions to this situation are based, for example, horrifically imposing a partial arms embargo on an ally while it's fighting a Seven Front war. Sanctioning ministers in a friendly government, a democratic government, never been done before. And some of the statements that are made by the likes of Keir Starmer and David Lammy and others, this has nothing to do with Israel, in my opinion. It's all about domestic politics. It's all about appeasing the significant base of support for the current government, for the Labour Party, that is very anti-Israel. That's what it's all about. And when you hear people like Keir Starmer talking about Gaza, for example, I spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu. I emphasised to him how important it is that he minimises the deaths of civilians, takes all possible precautions. He knows, when he says that, he knows exactly what the IDF is doing in Gaza. He's got people over here. He's got military attachés. He's got other people. They know exactly what's happening. He knows that Israel's taking the maximum precautions. But he has to say that in order to placate his base. And the problem with it is, I say he has to say it, he doesn't have to say it, but he chooses to say it. The problem with it is that when you say Israel must take maximum precautions, it means they're not. That's what it means. And what that does is to give ammunition to the anti-Israel mobs and the Jew haters in the UK. It fuels their fire and makes it worse. And it's completely the wrong approach, because the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister and every other government minister have a direct responsibility. They don't necessarily have to echo everything that Israel says by any means, but they do have a direct responsibility to make sure the truth gets out there, to help protect the Jews in their own population, who are, as you know better than I do, are at grave risk and have been at even graver risk since this war began.
Your allegation there is that Keir Starmer has chosen to know what's going on, and he's chosen to bully the allied country that is having to deal with it in a way that is in fact legitimate, legal, and taking care of humanitarian needs at their weakest moment, purely for his own pragmatic benefit as a politician. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely that, for domestic purposes. For example, he's saying that when he says that we're withholding these arms to Israel, the only thing that can mean is because Israel's using them for unlawful purposes, yet he knows it's not true. It's performative, it's virtue signaling, and I think above all, it's playing to his own political supporters. And so it's by the way, that's not, as you know, that's not unique to Keir Starmer. This is the way that many politicians behave. And since this war began, I've spent a lot of time in meetings with political leaders from many different countries, from the United States, UK, European countries, Australia, South Africa, trying to explain to them the reality of what's going on over here. And many of them, privately, behind closed doors, they don't necessarily agree with me, but it's very clear that they don't disagree either. Their actions, and you take Australia as an example, the terrible actions of Australia, which used to be one of the staunchest allies of Israel, nothing whatever to do with the reality. Facts actually these days very often just don't matter, even to the top level political leaders.
You're an insider. You have these conversations. You have a better idea than most of what the politicians do know and don't know, and why they're behaving as they do. So to play devil's advocate, to give them the benefit of the doubt, if they weren't to behave that way, if they were to stand up for the truth and boldly in support of what Israel's doing, what would happen to them politically?
Well, potentially they could pay a significant political price. I'm talking particularly now about the Labour Party, which is effectively, it's Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party. Yes, it's been given a new coat of paint, but it's still the fundamental kind of anti-Semitic streak within the Labour Party is still there. I would say there's every probability that if Keir Starmer and David Lammy stood up and did what they thought was right, they would certainly suffer for that. You just have to look at the way the party is plunging in the polls at the moment. Yes, there's not an election for a few years. They've got to bear that in mind, though. They've got to make sure that the party is electable in a few years' time. Yet they've got not only kind of reform biting at their heels, but they've also got, I think we saw it for the first time at the last election, activist Muslim political parties standing on a anti-Israel platform. And that gives them very good reason to be fearful that this will expand before the next election. I think one of the reasons why this phenomenon occurred for the first time at that election was because Starmer was not sufficiently anti-Israel in the run-up to the election. I think by and large, I was quite impressed actually by him, because I thought he followed a pretty strong government line, a conservative government line, which was pretty strongly in support of it. Not strong enough, but pretty strongly. And I think he paid maybe a small price at the election, but nevertheless a price that he doesn't want to pay again.
You must know from your experience of the actual close collaboration and connection between Israel and the UK and other Western players, how many times Israel has actually saved lives in Britain, has given intelligence that has helped to foil terror plots, all of those sorts of things. Why do you feel or think Britain and other countries react, let's say, so ungratefully in response to what is effectively an ally that is on the front line of the exact same battle that Britain is not only going to face, but is basically facing now?
Yeah, I mean, on the first part of what you were saying there, I know from direct personal experience that Israeli intelligence...
That's a missile warning.
So we've got half an hour or so.
Shall we? Well, we usually have good 10, 15 minutes. If you want to carry on, I'm happy to.
I'm happy to, yeah.
Okay, good. So yes, sorry, one of the occupational hazards of being out here at the moment, but I suppose that's a good example. This is a country that's put in place this extraordinary warning system. We now have a warning for the warning, to the extent that you and I can keep talking. It's a country that's really figured out how to deal with these drastic problems that really are facing or beginning to face all of us. It should be an example rather than a pariah.
Absolutely, and it is an example to us. And let me tell you that many generals from different countries around the world, including the United States and from Arab countries, have been here during the wars. I'm talking about since the 7th of October. They've come here to learn the way that Israel does business. And before that, there were many occasions when generals from different countries around the world came to do the same thing in previous conflicts. And while, for example, the German government, I think it was, during one of the earlier Gaza conflicts, was lambasting Israel for not taking enough care of innocent civilian lives inside Gaza, at the same time, a delegation, including a serving German general, was here learning about how the Israelis do it. I wouldn't describe it as hypocrisy. It is probably hypocrisy, but I think it's political expediency, which takes precedence over doing the right thing. And I was just mentioning before that I know from direct personal experience that how the Israeli intelligence, Israeli technology, Israeli sharing of knowledge and information has saved many, many British lives. And just to give you one example of that, when I was in Afghanistan, it was the first time, this was back in 2003, first time I had experienced or had to deal with suicide terrorism. Plenty of other different types of terrorism before that, not suicide terrorism. The Israelis sent their #1 expert from Israel to London to brief me on exactly what the IDF do dealing with suicide terrorism. That became British Army doctrine and later NATO doctrine. They sent this guy specifically to come and see me. That one action saved many, many lives. And there are plenty of other examples I could give you in relation to specific intelligence. One other example, which is not in my time working in this world, but occurred more recently in 2015, there was an Iranian cell in London trying to set up an explosives factory to carry out terrorist attacks in the UK, which was interdicted by our intelligence services on the basis of intelligence given to them by Israel. Just one example of many, many I could give you.
And yet what we see now that Israel is taking on the Islamic Republic of Iran is this let's say, hesitation on the part of Great Britain to actually fully and wholeheartedly endorse Israel's actions and to stand behind Israel, at the very least, to just say, yes, we support this. Yes, Israel is correct to operate in this way. And that is even after, you're telling me, Britain has saved lives of Britons with intelligence from Israel, specifically from attacks from the Islamic Republic.
Yeah, absolutely. And the British approach to this has been, I think, disgraceful. It actually, interestingly enough, mirrors the Russian approach. The Kremlin has told Israel to stand down, to basically de-escalate the situation, because they're so concerned about loss of life. And the British government, those are the words of the British government as well.